The blizzard had been screaming across the frozen plains for 3 days straight. Snow fell so thick that a man could not see his own hand if he held it out in front of his face. The wind cut through every layer of clothing like 1,000 tiny knives. On a planet like this, at the edge of known space, the cold was not just uncomfortable. It was a killer. Thomas Park stood at the window of the mining outpost control room and watched the white chaos outside. He was a big man with rough hands and tired eyes. 42 years old. 20 of those years spent working jobs that nobody else wanted, on planets that nobody else would touch. He was the foreman here, which meant he was responsible for keeping 37 people alive in a place that wanted them dead. The outpost was simple. Metal walls. Eating units that groaned and complained but never stopped working. Humans built things to last, even if they were not pretty. The Galactic Council called human technology primitive. Thomas called it reliable. When your life depended on a machine working in -60 temperatures, you wanted something ugly and stubborn, not something elegant and delicate. He took a sip of his coffee and checked the thermal sensors for the 100th time that night. Everything looked normal. The perimeter fence was holding. The power grid was stable. His crew was safe in their bunks, sleeping through another frozen night. Then he saw it. A flash of movement on the sensor screen. Something big had just hit the outer fence. Thomas set down his coffee and grabbed his rifle. He pulled on his thermal suit, the thick one that made him look like a walking balloon, and stepped into the airlock. The cold hit him like a punch to the chest the moment the outer door opened. His breath turned to ice crystals in the air. He could barely see 3 feet ahead. He followed the fence line, one hand on the metal to keep himself from getting lost. The wind pushed against him like it was trying to throw him off the planet entirely. His boots crunched through snow that came up to his knees. He found the damaged section of fence after 10 minutes of walking. Something had crashed through it, leaving a gap wide enough for a truck to pass through. Thomas raised his rifle and followed the trail of broken snow. What he found made him stop breathing. A dragon. A real, actual dragon. One of the Dravari, the ancient species that ruled 3 sectors of the galaxy and looked down on every other race like they were insects. Thomas had never seen one in person before, only in pictures and news reports. They were supposed to be magnificent, terrifying, proud. This one was dying. She was curled into a ball in the snow, her massive body wrapped around 2 smaller shapes. Her scales, which should have been bright and shimmering, were cracked and gray with frostbite. Her wings were torn, the delicate membrane shredded by what looked like weapons fire. Her eyes, golden and ancient, looked up at Thomas with an expression he never expected to see on a Dravari. Face. Fear. Desperation. A mother's love. "Please," she said. Her voice was rough and weak. She spoke common, the universal trade language, but her accent was thick. "My children. They are dying. Please help them." Thomas stood there in the howling wind, his rifle still raised. He thought about his brother Michael, who had died in the border conflicts 5 years ago. A Dravari warship had destroyed his transport. No survivors. Thomas had spent years hating these creatures, these arrogant dragons who had voted against humanity joining the Galactic Council. They called humans vermin. They called humans short-lived and worthless. He should walk away. He should go back to the outpost and pretend he never saw anything. Nobody would blame him. His crew would probably thank him. But he looked at those 2 small shapes huddled against their mother's chest. They were not moving. They were just children. Just babies, really. And their mother had dragged herself through a killing blizzard to find help, even from a species she had been taught to hate. Thomas lowered his rifle. "Can you walk?" he asked. The dragon mother stared at him like she could not believe what she was hearing. "You will help us?" "I am asking if you can walk. The outpost is about half a mile that way." I cannot carry you. I can walk." She struggled to rise, her legs shaking beneath her. She kept her children clutched against her chest, wrapped in what remained of her wings. "I can walk for them." Thomas nodded and started back toward the fence. He did not offer his hand because he knew she would not take it. Dravari were proud, even when they were broken. He simply walked, and she followed. The journey back took almost an hour. Several times the dragon mother fell to her knees. Each time, she forced herself back up. Thomas walked slowly, matching her pace, using his body to block some of the wind. He did not speak. Neither did she. When they finally reached the outpost airlock, Thomas helped her squeeze through the narrow doorway. Her body was too big for human architecture, and she had to fold herself almost in half to fit. Her children hung limply in her arms. The inner door opened, and warm air rushed over them like a blessing. David Lee was standing in the corridor, his face pale with shock. He was Thomas's second in command, a good worker, but a man who held grudges. His father had also died in the border conflicts. "Thomas," David said slowly, staring at the dragon, "what the hell did you just bring into our home?" "People who needed help," Thomas replied. He looked at the dragon mother, who was swaying on her feet, barely conscious. "Get Grace. Tell her we have patience. And clear out storage room 4. It is the only space big enough. They are Dravari. They are the enemy. They are a mother and her children, and they will die if we do not help them." Thomas met David's eyes steadily. "I am not asking for a vote. I am giving an order. Get Grace, now." David stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Thomas guided the dragon mother down the corridor. She leaned against the wall, leaving trails of frost and blood on the metal. Her children still had not moved. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not understand why you are doing this, but thank you." Thomas did not answer. He was not sure he understood either. He just knew that some choices define who you were as a person. And tonight, he had chosen to be someone who helped. He hoped he would not regret it. Grace Kim had been a medic for 15 years. She had treated broken bones, radiation burns, mining accidents, and once even a man who had been partially eaten by the local wildlife. She thought she had seen everything this frozen planet could throw at her dot. She was wrong. "You want me to do what?" she asked, staring at the massive dragon curled up in storage room 4. "Save her children," Thomas said. "And her, if you can." Grace looked at the 2 small dragons lying on a pile of thermal blankets. They were about the size of large dogs, with scales that should have been bright blue, but were now dull and gray. Their breathing was shallow. Their eyes were closed. Frost still clung to their small wings. "Thomas, I am a human medic. I know human medicine. I have no idea how Dravari bodies work. Their blood might be a different color. Their organs might be in different places. I could kill them just by trying to help. If you do nothing, they die for certain," Thomas replied quietly. "At least this way, they have a chance." Grace took a deep breath. She looked at the dragon mother, who was watching her with desperate golden eyes. The mother had not eaten or slept since arriving 6 hours ago. She refused to leave her children's side even for a moment. "What are their names?" Grace asked. The dragon mother seemed surprised by the question. "The older one is Doran. The younger is Kira. She is only 12 cycles old. That is, perhaps 8 of your human years. 8 years old." Grace thought of her own niece back on Earth, who was about that age. A little girl who liked to draw pictures of stars and dreamed of becoming a pilot someday. "Okay," Grace said, rolling up her sleeves. "I will do what I can. But I need you to help me. Tell me everything about Dravari biology that might matter. Where's the heart? How does the blood flow? What temperatures are dangerous? For the next several hours, Grace worked alongside the Dragon Mother. She learned that Dravari blood was copper-based, which made it blue-green instead of red. She learned that their hearts were in the center of their chests, not offset to the left like humans. She learned that they could survive cold that would kill a human, but only for a short time. Extended exposure caused their scales to crack and their internal heat to fade away. Grace used warming blankets and heated fluids, adjusted for what the mother told her about Dravari needs. She treated the wounds on the children's wings with human antibiotics, hoping they would work on alien biology. She monitored their temperatures with sensors pressed against their scales. Outside the storage room, the rest of the crew gathered in the common area. They spoke in low, angry voices. "Thomas has lost his mind," said Robert Williams, one of the miners. "Bringing those things into our home. They will murder us in our sleep." "They are half dead," replied Samuel Cho, the camp engineer. "I do not think they could murder a sandwich right now." "That is not the point. The point is what they represent. The Dravari Empire has been trying to keep humanity down for generations. They voted against us joining the council. They think we are animals." David Lee stood by the window, his arms crossed over his chest. "Thomas made a choice. I do not agree with it, but he is the foreman. We follow his orders, even orders that get us killed." "Nobody is getting killed tonight," David said firmly. "Look, I hate the Dravari as much as anyone. My father died because of them. But Thomas is right about one thing. Those are children in there. And I am not ready to become the kind of person who lets children die." The room fell silent. Nobody had a good response to that dot in storage room 4. Grace finally stepped back from her patients. The smaller dragon, Kira, had opened her eyes. They were beautiful, like pools of liquid gold. She looked around the strange room with confusion and fear. "Mother?" she whispered. The Dragon Mother rushed to her daughter's side, making soft sounds that Grace assumed were words of comfort in their native language. Kira pressed herself against her mother's chest, trembling. "She is going to be okay," Grace said. "Her temperature is coming back up. The wounds are not infected. She just needs rest and warmth." "And Doran?" the mother asked. Grace looked at the older child, who was still unconscious. His breathing was steadier than before, but he had not woken up. He was exposed longer. It will take more time, but I think he will recover. The Dragon Mother closed her eyes. A single tear ran down her scaled face. Grace had not known that dragons could cry. "I am Lady Virenth," the dragon said. "Of House Virenth, one of the noble families of the Dravari Empire. I was a diplomat, traveling to negotiate a treaty with a rival faction. Our ship was attacked. My mate, my guards, everyone died. I took the children and ran. I did not know where I was going. I only knew I had to keep them alive." "How far did you carry them?" Grace asked. "I do not know. Many miles. The cold was eating at my wings, but I could not stop. If I stopped, they would die." Virenth looked at Grace with an expression that was almost human. "I never thought a human would help us. My people have said such terrible things about your kind. We called you vermin. We said you were beneath us." Grace sat down on a storage crate, suddenly exhausted. "Yeah, well, some of your people killed my uncle in the border conflicts. I was not exactly a fan of Dravari before tonight either. Then why did you help my children?" Grace thought about the question for a long moment. "Because they are children. Because they were hurting. Because helping people is what I do." She shrugged. "Maybe because I wanted to prove that humans are better than what your people think we are." Virenth was quiet for a while. Then she said, "My people have a concept called the life debt. When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never fully be repaid. You saved my children. You saved me. I do not know how to repay such a debt to humans. You do not owe us anything, Grace said. Just get better. Let your kids get better. That is enough. But Virance shook her head slowly. No, that is not how debts work. You have given me something precious. Someday, I will find a way to give something precious back. That is the Dravari way. That is my way. Grace did not know what to say to that. So she just checked the children's temperatures one more time, made sure they were comfortable, and left the dragon family to rest out in the corridor outside. Thomas was waiting. How are they? He asked. They will live, Grace said. All three of them. Thomas nodded slowly. He looked tired, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. Thank you, Grace. I know this was not easy. Nothing about tonight was easy. Grace looked at him curiously. Why did you really save them? And do not give me that speech about doing the right thing. There is something else. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I kept thinking about what Michael would have wanted. My brother. He was always the better person between us. He would have helped them without hesitation. I guess I wanted to be more like him. Grace put a hand on his shoulder. I think he would be proud of you. Thomas did not respond. He just stood there in the corridor, listening to the wind howl outside, thinking about choices and consequences and what it meant to be human in a galaxy that did not always want them. 3 weeks passed. The blizzard finally stopped, leaving behind a world of endless white silence. The sun came out, pale and distant, offering light but little warmth. Life at the mining outpost slowly returned to normal, except for the 3 dragons living in storage room 4. Doran woke up on the 5th day. His first words were a question about his sister, which made Grace smile. Kira had barely left his side during his unconsciousness, curling up against him and refusing to move even when her mother tried to make her eat. Now the 2 young dragons were recovering together, growing stronger each day. The crew did not know what to make of their strange guests. Some of the workers refused to go near storage room 4. Others found reasons to walk past it, sneaking curious glances at the dragons inside. Robert Williams continued to grumble about the danger, but even he stopped talking about throwing them back into the cold. Lady Virance remained formal and distant at first. She thanked the humans politely for their help, but she kept her children close and watched everyone with suspicious eyes. She expected cruelty. She expected demands. She had grown up in the Dravari court, where nothing was ever given freely. But the days passed and no demands came. The humans simply shared their food, offered extra blankets, and went about their work. They treated the dragons not as enemies or bargaining chips, but as guests thought it was young Doran who broke down the walls first. He was fascinated by human technology. The Dravari had spaceships that could cross the galaxy in days, powered by energy sources that humans could barely understand. But human machines were different. They were rough and loud and full of moving parts. They broke down constantly and had to be fixed by hand. To Doran, this was incredible. Your machines are so strange, he said to Samuel Cho one morning, watching the engineer repair a heating unit. Everything is exposed. I can see all the pieces working. Samuel laughed. Yeah, our stuff is not pretty. But it works, and when it breaks, I can fix it myself. I do not need a team of experts or special tools. Just some wire, some tape, and a lot of stubbornness. Can you show me how? Samuel looked at the young dragon, who was about the size of a large dog and covered in scales that were slowly regaining their blue color. His golden eyes were bright with curiosity. Sure, Samuel said. Come here. See this coil? It carries heat through the system. When it gets clogged with dust, the whole unit starts to fail. So you clean it out like this. From that day on, Doran followed Samuel everywhere. He watched the engineer fix pipes, repair generators, and adjust the mining equipment. He asked endless questions about how things worked and why humans built them the way they did. Samuel, who had never expected to become a teacher, found that he enjoyed explaining his craft to someone who genuinely wanted to learn. "Your technology would never work in the Empire," Doran said one day. "Our ships are too advanced, too complicated. When something breaks, only specialists can fix it. Sometimes we have to wait weeks for the right expert to arrive." "That sounds frustrating," Samuel replied. "It is. But your way means anyone can keep things running, even alone, even on a frozen planet at the edge of nowhere." Doran tilted his head thoughtfully. "I think maybe that is why humans survive in places where other species do not. You do not need perfection. You just need good enough." Samuel smiled. That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about human engineering. Meanwhile, Kira remained quiet and withdrawn. The trauma of nearly dying, of losing her father, of being hunted across space, had left deep marks on her young mind. She would not speak to most of the crew. She stayed close to her mother or her brother, watching the humans with wary eyes. But she watched Thomas most of all. He noticed, of course. It was hard to miss a small dragon following you with her gaze wherever you went. At first, Thomas tried to give her space. He understood trauma. He understood fear. He did not want to push. One evening, he was sitting alone in the common room, doing paperwork by lamplight. The rest of the crew had gone to bed. The outpost was quiet except for the distant hum of the heating system. A small sound made him look up. Kira was standing in the doorway, her wings folded against her back, her tail curled nervously around her feet. "Hello," Thomas said gently. "Cannot sleep?" Kira shook her head. She took a few hesitant steps into the room, then stopped, as if unsure whether she was allowed to come closer. "You can sit down if you want," Thomas offered. Gesturing to the chair across from him, she moved slowly, carefully, and climbed into the chair. Her claws scratched against the metal, but she managed to fold herself into something like a sitting position. For a long moment, she just sat there, watching him work. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, barely more than a whisper. "Why did you save us?" Thomas set down his pen. He had been expecting this question, but not from her. "Because you needed help. But you hate us. Your people hate us. We killed your brother." Thomas felt a sharp pain in his chest, the old wound that never quite healed. "Yes, you killed my brother. Or at least your people did. And for a long time, I was very angry about that. I wanted to hate all Dravari forever, but you saved us anyway." "I did? Why?" Thomas thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing 100 times over the past 3 weeks. The answer was complicated. The answer was simple. "Because hate is heavy," he said finally. "It is like carrying a big rock everywhere you go. It weighs you down. It makes you tired. It makes you into someone you do not want to be." He looked at the young dragon with kind eyes. "I did not want to carry that rock anymore. Saving you, it was a way of putting it down." Kira was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My father is dead. I know. I'm sorry. I miss him. I know that too." Kira looked down at her claws. A tear fell onto the table. "He told me that humans were dangerous. He told me to never trust them. But you saved my life. You saved my mother. You saved Doran." She looked up at Thomas, her golden eyes shining with tears. "I do not understand." Thomas reached across the table and, very gently, touched her small paw. She flinched at first, then relaxed. "Maybe your father was wrong about some things," Thomas said softly. "Maybe my people were wrong about some things too. Maybe the only way to find out the truth is to give each other a chance." Kira did not respond, but she did not pull her paw away either. They sat there together in the quiet lamplight. A human foreman and a dragon child. Both of them carrying grief. Both of them learning to trust. Outside, the frozen world was silent and still. But inside the outpost, something warm was beginning to grow. The next morning, Grace found Kira helping Thomas organize supplies in the storage room. The little dragon was carefully sorting boxes with her claws, while Thomas marked inventory on a clipboard. "Wow," Grace said, leaning against the doorway. "That is something I never expected to see." Thomas just smiled and kept working. Lady Virenth, watching from across the room, said nothing. But for the first time since arriving at the outpost, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found something more than sheltered Dodd. She had found something like family. The ship appeared on the morning of the 32nd day. Thomas was outside with a work crew, inspecting damage to the mining equipment, when the shadow fell over them. He looked up and felt his heart stop. A Dravari warship, massive and terrifying, descended through the clouds like a predator dropping onto its prey. Its hull was covered in weapons. Its engines roared with power that made human technology seem like children's toys. "Everyone inside," Thomas ordered, keeping his voice calm even as fear crawled through his chest. "Now, move." The crew ran for the outpost. Thomas stayed where he was, watching the ship land about 200 meters from the perimeter fence. Snow exploded outward in a massive wave. The ground shook beneath his boots. A door opened in the side of the ship, and soldiers poured out. Dravari warriors in full battle armor, carrying weapons that can vaporize a human with a single shot. They moved with the precision of professionals, spreading out to surround the outpost Dodd. Then came their leader. He was larger than Lady Virenth, with scales that were deep red like old blood. His eyes were hard and cold. His armor was decorated with symbols of rank and honor. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never been defeated. "I am Commander Valros," he announced, his voice carrying across the snow. "I am here to retrieve Lady Virenth and her children. Surrender them immediately, and I will allow your colony to survive." Thomas walked forward, his hands raised and empty. His crew was watching from the outpost windows. He could feel their fear. He shared it. "Commander," he said, "Lady Virenth and her children are here. They are safe and healthy. But before you do anything, maybe you should talk to them." Valros stared at him with open contempt. "A human does not give orders to a Dravari commander. You will surrender the lady immediately, or I will burn this outpost to ash. She is not a prisoner. She is a guest." Valros laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "A guest? In a human colony? Do you think I am stupid? You are holding her for ransom. You are using her for political leverage. That is what humans do. That is all humans know how to do." "No," said a new voice. "That is what you think humans do. But you are wrong." Lady Virenth emerged from the outpost, stepping through the main door with her head held high. Her scales had healed, shining bright blue in the morning sun. Her wings spread wide behind her, whole and strong again. She looked every inch the noble she was. Behind her came Doran and Kira. Doran stood tall, trying to look brave despite his youth. Kira stayed close to her mother, but she did not hide. She looked at the soldiers with steady golden eyes. "My lady," Valros said, his voice softening with respect, "we have been searching for you for weeks. The Empire feared you were dead." "I would have been dead," Virenth replied coldly. "Dead and frozen in the snow along with my children. If not for these humans." Valros glanced at Thomas with confusion. "These humans saved you? They found us in the blizzard. They brought us inside. They healed our wounds, fed us, kept us warm. They shared everything they had with us." Virenth walked forward until she stood directly in front of the commander. "They could have let us die. They could have held us for ransom. They could have used us to negotiate with the Empire. But they did none of those things. They simply helped us because we needed help. That is... Valros seemed unable to find words. That is not possible. Humans are selfish. Humans are cruel. They do not help others without expecting something in return. That is what we were taught, Virant agreed. That is what I believed my entire life. But I was wrong. And so are you. Thomas stepped forward. The Dravari soldiers raised their weapons, but Valros held up a hand to stop them. Commander, Thomas said quietly, I understand why you came here ready for a fight. I understand why you expected the worst. But Lady Virant is telling you the truth. We help them because that is what decent people do. There is no trick. There is no hidden plan. We are just people who saw suffering and chose to end it. Valros studied him with those cold, ancient eyes. Why? Give me a reason I can understand. What did you gain from this? Thomas thought about the question. He thought about Michael, his brother who had died at the hands of Dravari warriors. He thought about all the hatred he had carried for so long. We gained the chance to be better than our worst instincts, he said finally. We gained the chance to prove that humans are more than what you think we are. Maybe that does not mean anything to you, but it means everything to us. Valros was silent for a long moment. The wind blew snow across the ground between them. The soldiers stood frozen, waiting for orders. Then Kira stepped forward. She walked past her mother, past the commander, until she stood directly in front of the nearest soldier. The warrior looked down at her with surprise. This human saved my life, Kira said, pointing at Thomas. He carried us through the blizzard. He gave us blankets and food. He sat with me when I was scared and sad. He is not a monster. He is kind. She looked up at Valros with those innocent golden eyes. Please do not hurt him, she said. Please do not hurt any of them. They are good people. Valros stared at the child. Something shifted in his expression, some crack appearing in the wall of his certainty. Commander, Lady Virant said softly, I owe these humans a life debt. Do you know what that means? Valros nodded slowly. It means they are protected by House Virant. To harm them would be to dishonor your entire bloodline. Yes, but it is more than that. It means I have seen something in them that changes everything I thought I knew about this species. Virant looked at Thomas with gratitude and respect. Humans are not what we believed. They are something more. Something that perhaps we need to learn from. Valros stood in silence for what felt like forever. Then he turned to his soldiers and gave an order in the Dravari language. The weapons lowered. The warriors relaxed their stances. It seems, Valros said carefully, that I came prepared for the wrong kind of encounter. I apologize for the threat to your colony, human Foreman. It appears my assumptions were incorrect. Thomas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Thank you, Commander. Would you and your soldiers like to come inside? We have hot drinks. Nothing fancy, but it is better than standing in the cold. Valros looked like he could not quite believe what he was hearing. But after a moment, he nodded. That would be acceptable. As the Dravari soldiers filed toward the outpost, David Lee appeared at Thomas's side. I cannot believe that worked, David muttered. Neither can I, Thomas admitted. David looked at him with something that might have been respect. You know what? I think I was wrong about you. And about them. Maybe we all were. Thomas watched Kira walking between the massive Dravari warriors, chattering excitedly about something she had learned from Samuel about human engines. The warriors looked bewildered, but not unkind. Maybe, Thomas said. Or maybe we just never gave each other a chance to be right. He followed his strange guests into the outpost, wondering what the future would hold for a galaxy that was just beginning to change. The day of departure came too soon. Commander Valrus had stayed for 3 days, during which time his entire view of humanity had been quietly torn apart and rebuilt. He watched the human miners share their meals with his soldiers without asking for anything in return. He watched Samuel teach young Doran how to repair a broken generator, explaining each step with patience and care. He watched Grace check on Lady Virant's healing wings, even though her duties had officially ended weeks ago. Most of all, he watched Thomas. The human foreman went about his work the same way he always did. No speeches. No grand gestures. He simply treated everyone, human and Dravari alike, with the same quiet respect and practical kindness. When a Dravari soldier slipped on the ice outside the outpost, Thomas helped him up without hesitation. When Valrus asked questions about human mining operations, Thomas answered honestly, holding nothing back. "You are a strange species," Valrus said on the third evening, sitting across from Thomas in the common room. Around them, humans and Dravari soldiers shared drinks and traded stories about their homes. "I have heard that before," Thomas replied with a small smile. "In the Empire, power is everything. Status, rank, wealth. We spend our lives climbing over each other to reach the top. Kindness is considered weakness. Compassion is something to be exploited." Valrus shook his head slowly. "But you have power here. You are the leader. You could have demanded anything from Lady Virant. Instead, you asked for nothing. What would I demand? Money we cannot spend on a frozen rock? Political favors I do not understand." Thomas shrugged. "All we needed was to know that we did the right thing. That is enough. That is what I do not understand." "How is that enough?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, thinking about the question. "When my brother died, I was angry for a long time. I wanted revenge. I wanted every Dravari to suffer the way I suffered. But holding on to that anger, it did not bring him back. It just made me miserable. It made me into someone I did not recognize." He looked at Valrus with tired but peaceful eyes. Saving Lady Virant and her children, it was not just about helping them. It was about proving to myself that I could let go of the hate, that I could be the kind of person my brother would have been proud of. Thomas smiled sadly. "In a way, you Dravari gave me a gift without knowing it. You gave me a chance to heal." Valrus was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that Thomas never expected to hear. "I think I understand now why the Galactic Council fears your species. Fears us? We are the weakest civilization in known space. No, you are the most dangerous." Valrus leaned forward, his red scales gleaming in the lamplight. "Not because of your weapons or your technology, but because of this kindness. This ability to love your enemies. This refusal to become what others want you to be." He shook his head in wonder. "We can fight armies. We cannot fight this." The next morning, Lady Virant gathered the entire outpost crew together for a ceremony. She stood at the center of the common room, her children on either side of her. Her scales shimmered like sapphires. Her eyes held the weight of ancient nobility. But her voice, when she spoke, was warm and sincere. 37 days ago, I crawled through a blizzard with my dying children, certain that death was coming for us. I had no hope. I had no faith. I had only desperation." She looked at Thomas. "And then a human foreman found us in the snow and made a choice that changed everything." She walked toward Thomas and stopped directly in front of him. "In the Dravari Empire, we have a ritual for moments like this. When a life is saved, a debt is created. That debt is symbolized by the giving of a scale." She reached up to her chest, where her scales were thickest and brightest, and carefully pulled one free. It came loose with a soft sound, leaving a small patch of bare skin beneath Dot. The scale was beautiful, iridescent blue with threads of gold running through it. It was warm to the touch when she pressed it into Thomas's hand. "This scale represents the heart of House Virant," Lady Virant said. "Show it to any Dravari in the galaxy, and they will know that you are under our protection. They will know that you are owed the same respect as a member of our noble house. They will know that a human foreman on a forgotten planet at the edge of nowhere taught a dragon what honor truly means." Thomas looked at the scale in his hand. It caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. He did not know what to say. Kira stepped forward and hugged him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. She barely reached his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Thomas hugged her back, feeling something loosen in his chest. Something that had been tight and painful for a very long time. "Take care of yourself," he said gruffly. "And your brother. And your mother." "I will." She pulled back and looked up at him with those golden eyes. "Will I ever see you again?" "I do not know. The galaxy is very big. But if you ever need help, you know where to find us." Kira nodded seriously. Then she rejoined her family as they walked toward the Dravari warship waiting outside. The entire crew watched them go. Nobody spoke until the ship rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds. Then David Lee let out a long breath. "Wow, that was not how I expected this month to go." Thomas laughed. It felt good to laugh. No, it was not. The months that followed brought changes nobody could have predicted. Lady Virant returned to the Dravari Empire and immediately began a campaign to change how her people viewed humanity. She spoke before the High Council. She testified about what she had witnessed. She showed them the crude human machines that worked when Dravari technology failed. She told them about the Foreman, who had every reason to hate dragons, but chose mercy instead. At first, the council dismissed her. They called her trauma-affected. They suggested her judgment was compromised, but Virant was relentless. She called in favors. She formed alliances. She used every skill she had learned as a diplomat to push for change. And slowly and possibly, the tide began to turn. 1 year after leaving the frozen outpost, Lady Virant stood before the Galactic Council as the newly appointed representative of the Dravari Empire. And she made the motion that changed history. "I move that the human species be granted full membership in the Galactic Council." The vote was close. There were objections, protests, centuries of prejudice to overcome. But in the end, the motion passed. Humanity had finally joined the stars. Thomas learned about it from a news broadcast. He was sitting in the same common room where he had first offered shelter to a dying dragon, drinking the same bad coffee, doing the same endless paperwork. Grace sat down across from him, grinning from ear to ear. "Did you see? We are actually in the council. I saw. And they are saying it is because of Lady Virant. Because of what happened here. Because of what you did." Thomas shook his head. "I did not do anything special. I just made a choice." "You made a choice that changed the galaxy." Before Thomas could respond, there was a knock at the door. One of the Myers poked his head in. "Boss? There is another Dravari ship landing outside. They say they have a delivery for someone named Thomas Park." Thomas sighed and put down his coffee. "What is it this time?" He walked outside to find a small transport ship and 3 Dravari workers unloading crates. The crates were filled with food, medicine, equipment, and 100 other supplies the outpost desperately needed. There was also a letter, written in careful common, addressed to Thomas personally. "Dear Thomas," he read aloud. "These supplies are a small gift from House Virant. Please do not refuse them. My children talk about you constantly. Doran has built 3 different engines based on what Samuel taught him. Kira keeps a picture of your outpost in her room. She says she wants to visit again someday, when she is older. I hope you will allow it. You changed our lives. You changed my entire understanding of what is possible between our species. For that, I can never repay you. But I can make sure your people never run out of coffee again. With eternal gratitude, Lady Virenth. Thomas folded the letter and put it in his pocket. His daughter Emily, who had arrived from Earth 2 months ago to work at the outpost, walked up beside him. "Dad," she said, watching the Dravari workers stack crates, "I think you accidentally became a legend." Thomas sighed, ran a hand through his graying hair, and watched another transport ship descend through the clouds. "I was just doing my job," he said. But even as he said it, he knew it was not true. He had done something more than his job. He had made a choice, in a moment when nobody was watching, to be kind instead of cruel, to trust instead of hate, to offer shelter instead of turning away, and somehow, against all odds, that simple choice had helped change everything. He thought about Michael, his brother who had died believing that humans and Dravari could never coexist. He wished Michael could see this moment. He thought maybe, somewhere, Michael was seeing it. "Come on," Thomas said to his daughter. "Help me unload these supplies. And then we have work to do. The galaxy is not going to mine itself." Emily laughed and followed him toward the crates. Above them, the pale sun shone down on the frozen planet at the edge of nowhere. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt warm.